Rachel Morgan stood in front of the tall mirror in the bridal suite, her delicate fingers adjusting the pearl-studded veil that framed her soft curls. The air smelled faintly of lilies and perfume, a scent chosen to match the theme of the wedding: elegant, timeless, perfect. Her best friend, Jenna, hovered nearby, trying to keep her smile steady despite the tension swirling in the room. "He's probably stuck in traffic or making sure everything's flawless," Jenna said gently, placing a comforting hand on Rachel's shoulder. "Andrew loves you. You know that." Rachel gave a small nod, but her reflection didn't lie. Behind the makeup and the lace, worry had already etched itself into her eyes. She glanced at the clock on the wall again. 15 minutes late. Then 30. Now, nearly an hour. Her heart beat louder with each passing second, and every breath came harder than the last. Andrew Carter wasn't the kind of man who ran late. A millionaire by 30 and a perfectionist by nature, he thrived on order and punctuality. Something was wrong. Deep down, Rachel felt it, not in her head, but in her bones. The bridal suite door creaked open. Rachel turned, her breath hitching. But instead of Andrew, it was the priest, his face grave, eyes gentle with pity. Jenna's hand fell away as silence filled the room. "I'm so sorry, Miss Morgan," the priest said solemnly. "We've received word. Mr. Carter won't be coming." Rachel didn't scream, didn't faint. She just stood there, frozen, as if someone had ripped the floor out from beneath her. Her knees buckled slightly, but she caught herself on the edge of the vanity, the lace of her gown pooling like spilled milk around her feet. Her lips trembled. The tears, hot and fast, broke free, blurring her vision and streaking her carefully applied foundation. "This can't be happening," she whispered. Without another word, Rachel pushed past the priest and Jenna, stumbling down the corridor, her heels clacking like thunder against the marble floor. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd, still seated in the church pews, as she burst into the main hall. The music had long stopped. The guests watched with wide eyes and parted lips as the bride ran, bouquet forgotten, dignity trailing behind her like her veil. Outside, the sky was a sharp, painful blue. Rachel stood in the parking lot, her chest heaving, searching, hoping for a glimpse of Andrew's black car. Nothing. Just the gentle rustle of wind and a world that had moved on without her. Across the street, partially hidden by tinted windows, Andrew sat in the back of a sleek black sedan, watching her. His phone lay in his lap, screen still glowing with the last message from his mother. "This wedding is a mistake, Andrew. You know it. Think about your future. Think about the company. Think about what you're giving up."
Andrew closed his eyes and clenched his jaw. He knew walking away like this was unforgivable. But facing Rachel, seeing the hurt in her eyes, that was something he didn't have the strength to do. Not after his mother had reminded him of the consequences. If he went through with the wedding, he'd lose the financial support that had helped him build everything. Back in the lot, Rachel finally gave up and sat on the curb, her dress gathering dust and leaves. A child across the street pointed and asked something, but she didn't hear. All she could think about was the last real conversation they'd had. 2 weeks ago. She remembered the look on Andrew's face, distant, uncertain, as he held her hand. "Are you sure this is what you want?" he'd asked. "Of course," she'd said. "We love each other, don't we?" He had smiled then. A weak, uncertain smile. She had mistaken it for nerves. Now, she knew it had been a goodbye. That night, Rachel didn't return home. She walked aimlessly until the sky turned orange, then purple, then black. She took a cab to a cheap motel on the edge of town and stared at the ceiling for hours. Her phone buzzed with messages, but she didn't answer any of them. There was nothing left to say. The next morning, before the city stirred awake, Rachel boarded a Greyhound bus with no destination in mind. She left behind her apartment, her job, her friends, everything. All she wanted was distance. Distance from the church, from the whispers, from the memory of Andrew's silence. She ended up in a small town nestled between two hills, where no one knew her name. There, she rented a tiny room above a diner and began working shifts as a waitress. The uniform was baggy and smelled faintly of grease, but the people were kind. The customers didn't ask questions, and the cook, an old man named Frank, never pried. But the pain didn't vanish. Rachel would wake up at night gasping, clutching her chest as if her heart were physically breaking. She often replayed the wedding day in her mind, wondering what she had missed. Was she too much? Too little? Had she loved him more than he loved her? Then, about 2 months in, her body began to betray her. Mornings became difficult. Her stomach turned at the smell of coffee, and she couldn't get through her shifts without napping between breaks. She chalked it up to stress, grief, perhaps, but the truth refused to stay hidden. One evening, while walking home from the grocery store, she passed by a pharmacy. On a whim, she bought a pregnancy test. She never expected the result to be positive. When the second pink line appeared, she dropped the stick onto the bathroom floor and stared at it, hand over her mouth. She was going to be a mother. Rachel sat motionless on the edge of her narrow bed, the pregnancy test resting like a loaded secret beside her. Her breath was shallow, her hands trembling slightly. A baby. She was pregnant. The realization swelled within her like a wave, crashing into every part of her identity. She was no longer just the woman abandoned at the altar. She was going to be a mother. Fear was her first companion. How would she raise a child alone, with no family nearby, no savings, no stable future? She was working 2 shifts at a greasy diner and living above a barbershop. What kind of life could she offer? Her eyes stung with tears, but then something remarkable happened. She placed a hand on her stomach and whispered, "It's just you and me now." That night, a new kind of resolve took root. She made a doctor's appointment the next day and began searching for a slightly larger apartment. The next available unit was a modest 1-bedroom with creaky floors, chipped counters, and barely enough room for a crib. Still, it felt like progress. She started saving every tip, every spare dollar, clipping coupons, skipping meals to squirrel away money for baby clothes and vitamins. At her first ultrasound, Rachel lay on the table in a paper gown, staring nervously at the ceiling as the technician applied the cool gel to her belly. She had braced herself to hear 1 heartbeat, maybe 2. But nothing could have prepared her for what the technician said next. "Congratulations," the woman said with a warm smile, eyes flickering over the monitor. "It's 4. Rachel blinked. "I'm sorry." "What?" "4 heartbeats, the technician confirmed. "You're carrying quadruplets." The room spun. Rachel sat up too quickly, grabbing the edge of the table. "4?" she whispered. "Yes, ma'am. All healthy so far." It was too much. Too surreal. She'd thought she was alone. Thought she was barely capable of raising 1 baby. But 4? She walked home in a daze, the world around her muted like background noise. That night, she sat on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, tears flowing freely. The loneliness was unbearable. And yet, within that darkness, there was a flicker of something else. Purpose. "I will do this," she whispered into the silence. "For them." Over the next few months, Rachel transformed. Her tiny apartment became a nest of preparations. She painted thrifted furniture, learned how to sew basic baby clothes, and watched parenting videos late into the night. Her co-workers rallied behind her. Jenna, her best friend, tracked her down online and sent a care package with blankets and baby books. Even Frank, the old diner cook, slipped an envelope into her coat pocket one night. It had $300 in it and a note that simply said, "For diapers. You've got this, kid." By the time her belly had grown round and heavy, the whole town seemed to know her story. Not the one about the millionaire who left her, but the one about the strong young woman about to bring 4 new lives into the world. She walked the town square each evening for exercise, smiled at the mailman, and exchanged stories with other mothers at the laundromat. She was rebuilding, bit by bit. But the nights were hardest. There were moments when she would sit by the window and wonder what Andrew would say if he saw her now. Would he be angry? Would he be sorry? Did he ever think about her? She forced herself not to care. The day of the delivery came sooner than expected. Complications sent her into labor in the early morning hours of a cold November day. Nurses rushed around her, machines beeped frantically, and through the haze of fear, pain, and exhaustion, she brought 4 sons into the world. Ethan, the first to cry, with a strong, defiant wail. Caleb, the calmest, born with his eyes already open, studying the world. Mason, the one who reached out, grabbing a nurse's finger with astonishing strength. And Leo, the tiniest of them all, but with the loudest lungs. Rachel held them one by one, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her arms ached from the weight of them, but her heart felt whole. For the first time since the church, since the veil, since the curb outside that empty parking lot, she felt joy. She brought them home 2 weeks later, cradled in donated bassinets. The apartment was crowded, noisy, chaotic, but alive. Her days became a blur of bottles, diapers, lullabies, and sleepless nights. But Rachel never once thought of giving up. Years passed in a flurry. She taught herself to stretch meals and fix broken cribs with duct tape. She became an expert at calming 4 tantrums at once. And though her back ached and her eyes often burned from exhaustion, she never once regretted the decision to keep moving forward. When the boys turned 5, Rachel threw them a birthday party in the backyard. There were homemade cupcakes and secondhand toys, and laughter loud enough to echo down the block. Her little apartment was now a warm, well-worn home. Each of the boys had grown into their own world of wonder. Ethan was the bold leader, always daring his brothers to try something new. Caleb was soft-spoken and gentle, preferring books to games. Mason was the comedian, always with a silly face or knock-knock joke at the ready. And Leo, the one who'd been born smallest, had become the most determined of them all, always racing to be first. Rachel often sat on the porch in the evenings, a cup of cold coffee in hand, watching her sons play and argue and laugh. She had given them her all, and in return they had given her a life she never knew she needed. But life, unpredictable as ever, wasn't done with her yet. Because one sunny afternoon, as she walked the boys to the neighborhood park, she saw a man sitting alone on a bench near the playground. He wore sunglasses, a tailored coat, and an unreadable expression. Rachel's heart stopped. It was Andrew Carter. Rachel froze in place, her fingers tightening instinctively around the strap of her bag. The laughter of her boys rang out in the park around her, but her mind had narrowed to a single sharp point. The man on the bench. Andrew Carter. After 5 years, he was suddenly there, just a few feet away, looking older, sharper, and, somehow, haunted. He hadn't noticed her yet. His eyes were fixed on the children, scanning them curiously. Rachel followed his gaze and saw what he saw. Ethan and Mason were racing to the swings. Caleb sat reading a book beneath a tree, and Leo was busy trying to climb the jungle gym. They were so full of life, so beautiful, and unmistakably his. Even from a distance, the resemblance was undeniable. The dark hair, the jawline, the tilt of their heads when they smiled. It was like watching 4 miniature versions of the man who had once promised her forever and vanished. Her breath caught in her throat. Ethan, Caleb, Mason, Leo, she called out, louder than usual. Her voice trembled. The boys turned toward her with puzzled expressions, mid-play. Come on, it's time to go. Aw, Mom, we just got here, Mason whined, already halfway up the slide. I said now. She snapped. panic creeping into her voice. The boys knew that tone, sharp, serious, and began gathering their things. Before she could usher them away, she heard a voice behind her. Deep, familiar, and hesitant. "Rachel?" She turned slowly, every muscle in her body rigid. Andrew stood there, his sunglasses removed, revealing eyes that looked just as stormy as they had the last time she saw them. His gaze searched her face as if trying to confirm she was real. He took a slow step forward, but Rachel didn't move. "Are they yours?" he asked, his voice quiet, almost reverent, eyes flicking back toward the children now squabbling over a soccer ball. She didn't answer immediately. Her throat felt dry. Her pulse thudded in her ears. "Yes," she finally said, her voice steady. "They're mine." Andrew blinked, his mouth parting slightly, like he'd just been hit by a wave. "How old are they?" "You already know the answer to that." He swallowed hard. "Are they mine?" Rachel's jaw tightened. The question had lived in her imagination for 5 years, but hearing it aloud, spoken with such disbelief, was still a blade to the heart. "They're 5, Andrew," she said coldly. "Do the math." He looked like he'd been slapped. His hands fell to his sides as he tried to process it all. His eyes turned back to the boys, who had now noticed him and were glancing at their mother for clues. "I didn't know," he said, finally. "I had no idea." "You left me at the altar," Rachel said, her voice sharpening. "You disappeared. No goodbye. No explanation. What did you think would happen?" Andrew looked down, shame shadowing his face. "I was scared. My mother—" "Don't," she interrupted. "Don't blame your mother." He nodded once, as if accepting the blow. "I deserve that." There was a long pause between them, filled with the distant laughter of children and the hum of spring insects. Then Andrew looked at her again. "I want to meet them." Rachel's body stiffened. "Absolutely not. I'm their father." "No, Andrew," she said, her voice rising. "You're a stranger. A stranger who left before they were even born. You don't get to just show up and play dad now because you feel guilty. They deserve to know who I am." Rachel stepped closer, her expression fierce. "You think fatherhood is about DNA? It's not. It's about being there at 2 a.m. when one of them has a fever and won't stop crying. It's about skipping meals to buy school supplies. It's about telling them they're safe, even when you're terrified yourself. Where were you when I had nothing? When I gave birth alone? When I raised 4 boys by myself with no help, no money, no sleep?" Andrew was silent. She turned to go, grabbing Leo's hand as the other boys followed. But Andrew wasn't done. "If you won't let me be part of their lives," he said quietly, "I'll go to court." Rachel stopped in her tracks. For a moment, the park went silent in her mind. The audacity of those words rang louder than anything else. She turned back to him slowly, her eyes cold. "You do what you have to do," she said. "But if you think you can waltz in and tear apart everything I've built, think again." With that, she walked away, the boys trailing after her, confused and quiet. That night, after the boys had fallen asleep, Rachel sat alone on the edge of her bed, staring out the window. Her hands were clenched in her lap. Her heart felt like it had been cracked open again. She'd spent 5 years healing, protecting, rebuilding, and now the storm she'd escaped had come knocking. The next morning, there was a knock at her door. She hesitated before opening it. Andrew stood on her porch, alone. No suit, no sunglasses, no arrogance. Just a man with tired eyes and an envelope in his hand. "I'm not here to fight," he said. I had to see you again." Rachel didn't let him in. "You should leave." He paused. "You didn't tell them who I am, did you?" "No," she said. "They don't know you exist." And I'd like to keep it that way. They have a right to know. No. They have a right to be protected from people who abandon them, she shot back. Andrew looked down at the envelope in his hand. Then I guess I'll see you in court. He turned and walked down the steps. Rachel closed the door slowly, her hands trembling as they found the lock. She stood there for several minutes, her forehead resting against the wood, her mind spinning. The past wasn't done with her yet, and she would have to fight harder than ever to protect the future. Rachel stood by the kitchen counter, clutching the envelope Andrew had left behind. Inside was exactly what she feared. A formal notice of legal action. He was suing for joint custody. Her stomach dropped as if the floor had been ripped from beneath her feet. The words blurred before her eyes, but one sentence remained clear. The petitioner seeks legal recognition as the biological father and requests shared parental rights. The audacity left her breathless. That night, she called the only person she trusted with something this heavy. Monica Reyes, a childhood friend turned attorney, who had once told Rachel, "If you ever need me, day or night, I'll be there." Monica arrived the very next day with a thick briefcase and sharp eyes. She sat at Rachel's kitchen table, surrounded by half-eaten cereal bowls and crayon drawings, listening carefully as Rachel recounted everything. Andrew's return, the confrontation at the park, the legal threat. Monica nodded slowly, tapping a pen against her notepad. "He has money. He'll come in strong. But you've got something more powerful. Proof of unwavering care, sacrifice, and consistency. That's what courts respect." "What if that's not enough?" Rachel whispered, her voice cracking. "It will be," Monica said, with quiet conviction. "You're not just their mother, Rachel. You're their world." Over the next week, Monica began building the case. Rachel spent sleepless nights assembling photos, receipts, school reports, even birthday cards the boys had made for her. Testimonies were collected from neighbors, co-workers, and teachers, all of whom confirmed what Rachel already knew. She had raised 4 kind, joyful, well-adjusted boys entirely on her own. Still, fear loomed. The first court date arrived like thunder on the horizon. Rachel wore her best dress, clean but faded, and walked into the courtroom holding Monica's hand like a lifeline. Andrew was already seated with his high-powered attorney, dressed in a custom suit. But what stole Rachel's breath wasn't the suit. It was the woman beside him, Vanessa Sterling, Andrew's former business partner, now his fiancée. She sat with her legs crossed, chin lifted slightly, a polite smile frozen on her lips. Rachel recognized that smile instantly, the kind worn by people who believe they've already won. As the hearing began, Andrew's lawyer stood confidently, emphasizing his client's resources, stability, and desire to build a meaningful relationship with his sons. Rachel clenched her fists under the table. Then Monica rose, her voice clear and firm. "Your Honor, my client has raised these children single-handedly. She's provided love, safety, and education without so much as a phone call from Mr. Carter. He abandoned her before the children were born and never made an effort to find them until now." The judge listened attentively, taking notes. After arguments were made, the judge issued a temporary order. A full evaluation of both households would be conducted, and a social worker would be assigned to observe both parents and children before rendering a final decision. Rachel exhaled, but her relief was short-lived. Days later, Vanessa appeared at the boys' school, uninvited. She charmed the receptionist, handed out branded cupcakes, and introduced herself as someone who would be in the boys' lives very soon. Teachers were confused. Some parents were curious. But Rachel? Rachel was livid. That night, Monica slammed her files down on the table. "She's not just helping Andrew. She's orchestrating this. I guarantee you she's manipulating things behind the scenes." "She barely looked at me," Rachel muttered. "As if I were just an obstacle. That's exactly what you are to her, Monica replied. But we're not done yet. Then came the home visits. The social worker arrived at Rachel's house one rainy Thursday. She took notes while the boys showed her their art projects, their bunk beds, their chore charts. Rachel answered every question honestly, even when asked about income, stress, and sleepless nights. The worker seemed impressed, even moved. At Andrew's estate, things were different. According to Monica's source, Vanessa had staged everything. A brand new nursery had been set up, complete with name-labeled beds and unopened toys. But when the boys visited, they didn't know how to act. They clung to each other. They barely spoke. Andrew tried to make conversation, but Vanessa dominated the moment, guiding the social worker through the tour like she was selling real estate. Back at home, Rachel continued to do what she always did: pack lunches, read bedtime stories, listen to Caleb's dreams about becoming a paleontologist, and help Leo get over his fear of thunderstorms. Then, a twist. Monica called Rachel one evening, her voice urgent. "I found someone who wants to testify. Someone who used to work for Andrew's family." The next day, a fragile woman in her 60s, wearing a worn shawl and walking with a cane, entered Monica's office. Her name was Dorothy Hill, former housekeeper in the Carter estate. And what she revealed changed everything. "I was there," she said softly, wringing her hands. "I heard the conversations before the wedding. Andrew's mother threatened him, told him if he married Rachel, he'd lose everything. And Vanessa, she agreed with her, said it was for the best that he walk away." Rachel felt the air leave her lungs. Dorothy looked at her with kind, watery eyes. "I should have spoken up years ago. I'm sorry." "Will you testify?" Monica asked. Dorothy nodded. "I will." As the final court date approached, Rachel stood taller, stronger. She wasn't just a mother anymore. She was a warrior. And this time, she wasn't alone. But she also knew Vanessa wouldn't go down without a fight. The day of the final hearing arrived under a gray sky, as though even the weather held its breath. Rachel stood outside the courthouse in a modest navy dress, Monica at her side, her palm warm and grounding. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Andrew sat quietly beside his lawyer, but this time, Vanessa was conspicuously absent. Rachel took note, but said nothing. As proceedings began, the judge summarized the previous hearings, the evaluations, and the character statements. Monica stood and called her final witness. The courtroom doors opened slowly, revealing Dorothy Hill. Her cane tapped rhythmically on the floor as she walked forward. Rachel's heart pounded as she watched the older woman raise her hand and swear to tell the truth. Dorothy's testimony was quiet, but devastating. She recounted in detail how Andrew's mother had manipulated him, how Vanessa, then just a close advisor, had encouraged him to abandon the wedding. She described the cruel words she overheard, the plans to sever Rachel from Andrew's life entirely. "And Mr. Carter?" the judge asked. Dorothy hesitated. "He didn't argue. He just obeyed." The silence that followed was suffocating. Andrew didn't raise his voice. He didn't deny it. He just sat there, eyes lowered, ashamed. When it was Rachel's turn to speak, she stood slowly, her legs trembling but her voice clear. "I raised 4 boys without help. I worked 2 jobs. I missed meals. I've read bedtime stories while half asleep, nursed fevers through the night, and answered questions about why they didn't have a father, without ever speaking a bad word about the man who left me." Her eyes found Andrew's. "But they don't just need a man who wants to show up now. They need consistency, love, safety." Andrew stood as well, unprompted. "I made a mistake," he said simply. "I listened to the wrong people. I let fear guide me. And I regret it more than anything. But I want to be better. For them." His voice cracked. "I don't expect forgiveness. But I'm here now. and I'm not leaving again." The judge, solemn and reflective, reviewed both sides carefully before recessing to deliberate. Rachel sat outside the courtroom, her hands folded tightly in her lap, while Andrew stood silently nearby. For once, they weren't enemies. Just two people on opposite shores of the same storm. When the judge returned, the courtroom fell silent. After reviewing the evidence, testimonies, and home evaluations, he began. "This court has reached a decision." Rachel held her breath. "Primary custody will remain with Ms. Morgan," the judge continued. Relief flooded her chest, but the judge wasn't done. "Mr. Carter is granted structured visitation under a progressive schedule, with opportunities to build a relationship with the children." Rachel looked down, her chest tight. It was fair, but still terrifying. As the room began to empty, Andrew approached her, his voice quiet. "Thank you for not shutting the door completely." "I didn't do it for you," she said. "I did it for them." That night, Rachel told the boys that the man from the park would be visiting again. She didn't call him their father. Not yet. Just Andrew. Their reactions were mixed. Ethan was curious, Caleb cautious, Mason excited, and Leo quietly skeptical. Andrew arrived the following Saturday, awkward in his casual clothes, holding a soccer ball and a set of drawing pencils. He sat on the floor with the boys, listening more than talking. He laughed at their stories, watched them show off their Lego towers, and even joined a round of backyard tag, getting completely winded, but refusing to stop. Week after week, he returned. He brought simple things: Ethan's favorite book, a kite for the park, colored markers for Caleb. He wasn't trying to buy their love. He was showing up. On time. Every time. Rachel observed from a distance, arms crossed, always guarded. But what she saw began to chip away at her doubt. One afternoon, while folding laundry, she overheard Mason ask, "Do you think Andrew's like our real dad?" Rachel held her breath. Ethan responded without looking up. "He kind of feels like it." Weeks passed. Then months. Slowly, the boys began calling him Dad. Not because they were told to, but because it felt right. Even Leo, once the most withdrawn, now ran to him with drawings, eager for praise. Rachel remained cautious, but the distance between her and Andrew softened. He started staying after visits, helping with homework or dishes. Sometimes they would sit on the porch together while the boys slept, sipping tea in silence, talking softly. One evening, Andrew brought a photo album. Inside were pictures of his childhood, his dog, his sister, a treehouse he built with his grandfather. He showed the boys with pride, laughing at his ridiculous bowl haircut. They listened intently, completely absorbed. Rachel lingered in the doorway, her arms folded. But her face wasn't hard anymore. As the boys fell asleep that night, Andrew lingered, unsure. "Rachel," he said, "I know I hurt you. I know I don't deserve anything from you. But I want you to know, I never stopped loving you." She blinked, stunned. "I'm not asking for anything. I just needed to say it." She didn't respond. He left quietly. And yet, as she watched him walk to his car, she realized she hadn't shut the door in her heart. Not entirely. Something had changed. Spring returned to the town with soft winds, cherry blossoms, and a strange new feeling in Rachel's heart. Peace. Months had passed since the final court ruling. Andrew's presence in the boys' lives had become routine, natural even. He didn't miss a single visit. He took them to soccer practice, school recitals, library Saturdays. He learned how to braid Leo's hair after a phase of refusing haircuts. He stood by Mason during a stage fright meltdown and high-fived Ethan after every spelling test. Caleb even started calling him for advice about dinosaur facts. But it wasn't just the boys. Rachel, too, was changing. They began to talk more. Genuinely talk. about their fears, their exhaustion, their memories. One rainy evening, they cooked together in her tiny kitchen. Andrew nearly set a towel on fire trying to drain pasta, and she laughed harder than she had in years. That night, she realized she didn't feel broken anymore. Then came the picnic. Andrew invited them all to a quiet meadow outside town. The boys ran wild through the grass, chasing butterflies and throwing petals in the air. Rachel sat on a blanket, watching the sunlight dance across their curls. Andrew asked her to take a walk with him. She hesitated, but nodded. They strolled in silence for a few minutes until he stopped near a lone tree, pulling something from his jacket. A small box. Rachel's breath caught. "I'm not expecting an answer," he said. "But I have to ask." He opened the box to reveal a ring. Simple. Elegant. Familiar. "I walked away from you once because I was afraid of losing everything. But when I lost you, I realized I had nothing." He looked into her eyes. "You gave me 4 sons. A second chance to be a better man. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that I won't waste it." Rachel stared at him, the wind gently lifting strands of her hair. She thought of that rainy day 5 years ago. The veil, the tears, the curb outside the church. And now, this moment. "I should hate you," she whispered. "I know, but I don't." She exhaled. "I forgive you, Andrew." Then she smiled, soft and real. "Yes." Far behind them, 4 boys screamed with joy before they even knew why. Ethan had spotted the ring. Mason ran ahead, yelling, "Are we going to be a real family now?" Rachel laughed and opened her arms as they all rushed toward her. "Yes, my loves," she said, pulling them close. "We're a family." The wedding was small, in a garden. Friends from the diner came. The school principal brought flowers. Monica walked Rachel down the aisle. Ethan carried the rings. Caleb held the vows. Mason danced with the band. And Leo, the once shy boy, read a poem he wrote himself, making everyone cry. Andrew, with tears in his eyes, vowed never to leave again. Rachel's vows were simple. "You walked away once, but you came back for the right reasons. I see that now. I believe in who you are today, not who you were." They kissed beneath a canopy of spring blossoms as the boys cheered. That night, as the stars came out, the new family lay on the blanket in the same meadow, counting constellations. Andrew held Rachel's hand. The boys piled atop them like puppies. And for the first time in a very long time, Rachel didn't feel like a survivor. She felt like she had finally come home. Later that week, the boys surprised them with a homemade album titled, "Our Family is Forever." On the final page, in crooked handwriting, they had written, "You don't need to be perfect. Just stay." Rachel closed the book and held it to her chest, tears in her eyes. She'd begun this journey in heartbreak, but she ended it in love. And that made all the difference.